Hi there, in this video I'll be showing you how to make this bar chart with D3, with React, NX as an environment where I will be setting it all up. As you can see here, the graph is taking entire space of the page. D3 is using SVG elements, and all of this is actually built out of SVG elements like rectangles and some text elements. I will use NX for the project itself. It's something like Create React tab, but a bit more on steroids. It comes with CLI that allows you to generate components straight away. It divides your application into apps and then libraries and components. It has some good build scripts. For what I'm doing now, it might actually look like overkill. You probably could get away with something much simpler. But when it comes to making products for your clients, it's actually a very good environment to use. So I'll use this line here to generate my environment. It will ask me what's the name of the workspace. Based on that, NX will be creating relative paths for your components and libraries. So I'll just call it D3 graph. And now it's asking me what sort of workspace I want to use. It could be Angular, Next, Gatsby. I obviously want to use React. Application name. I'll just call it D3 graph. I'm going to use styled components. They do work well with SVG elements. You can create SVG elements with styled components, which is quite nice, and then apply some styles straight away to that. And I'm not going to use their cloud. It will install it now, which will take a couple of minutes. Okay, now that it's installed, let's just go into that folder. CD. I went to the folder and I will open Visual Studio Code. Yep. And okay, so this is the basic setup. The bigger project you plan, the more useful it gets. Let's just run this project. And I don't need that as well. If you never use style components, you are using basically normal CSS. Viewport height minus, let's say, 16 pixels. There is a default 8 pixels padding, so I'll just make it a bit smaller than that. Black, because in my example I used black as well. This is going to have it's not going to be visible, so let's give it a color white. Yeah, okay, so this is our container, and here I will be creating a new component. In NX, we call those like major components libraries. The idea is that those libraries can be shared between different apps, and we can easily export them into different projects as well. It's quite handy to work with. It's basically components with some extra functionality. Let's just create a new component, new library. I can just use CLI, so I can just say NX G, which is a generate, React, which means bar. And if I add this flag, run, without creating the library, it will show me how it would look, or what sort of files it would actually create, and which ones it would change. Will most you worry about this file? So I could use obviously CLI, but there is this cool extension for VS Code, which is called NX console, and it's actually quite handy to do it this way. I can just right click and NX generate bar chart directory. Let's just place it into features library, which will create directly under libs here because it's a library. Usually for most of the components I create in React, I use TypeScript. It's good to sort of avoid most of the pitfalls of passing values around and using them. The TypeScript might actually be harder at the beginning, but then it's actually very handy within the project. But here I want to avoid all of that. So yeah, I can set some presets straight away. Okay, let's just run this script. And now we have new library, as it's called, and this is the file. So it created this component, which is called features bar chart, because it's within the features folder, and then it's a bar chart. And I can just import it here into my app component. And what's nice about it is I can use relative path. So instead of doing something like that, I can just refer to it like that. So it's using this name of the application and folder and the component name. Usually when you create a new library, you might need to restart your console. Here, let's start again. My app component. And let's see how it looks now. Okay, so we have our title from earlier, and then there is this h1 that comes in within the features bar chart component for now. Okay, so now that we have all of that, we can start creating D3 stuff. I can remove that, obviously. It's not going to be pink anymore. I'm not passing any props, so I can just get rid of that. So yeah, that's my basic component. Let's just add D3 to my project. I forgot about that. And D3. Okay, done. Now start. Now let's just bring my D3. I will create a ref for this sort of wrapper. Refs help in React to specify which element you want to target. So I'll just give it null for now. My graph will obviously need some data. You could connect to some endpoint, but I will just have for this element, I will actually give it size. So it's gonna follow the entire page. In order to know the size of my inner graph SVG, I will measure this element by its ref later. And just hide. So it's going to take entire div. I will make a component here. So I will just say bar chart. Later on we can move it to separate component. We can just create another component here, but that's going to just keep it here. Equals. So it's like a component that will return. Okay, so it's going to return this SVG, and I will also create a ref for that. So let's just have it here. What I want to do now is to measure the entire wrapper that I work with, and I will pass it to this component so I can use it for the size of my SVG sort of area. I can't really say SVG take 100% height. It works with pixel values, so I could obviously do that. I won't see anything now, but at least I've got my scaffolding here. And if I go through the browser, okay, I've got this element, which should probably take entire height. Oh, it doesn't work. Yeah, obviously, when there's a typo, that would be better. Now I will measure this area and pass it into this SVG component. I also don't like this text anymore. I don't need it. I will take it out from my app component. So I will take my SVG and I give it 100% width and height. I'll just pass data into my bar chart. Data. And now we can just destructure it. So now I'll take the size of this div component, which is like a full width and height, and I will pass it down to my bar chart. I will create a state variable for the size. Currently it's null, but when the component loads, it's going to check if it's there, and then it will measure it. I will use useEffect, which needs to be added obviously to my React imports. Create a variable called wrapper. In my case, I'm using D3 selector, and I'm selecting my ref, and I'm selecting current ref basically, and then I'm measuring the size of that node basically within it. So when it loads, I will know the sizes of that, and I will obviously save it in my state. Let's use my set size state function to take it from my wrapper. So I will know now that the size of this container is this many pixels. I will need those pixel values later. Dot width, height. I will obviously have to check whether my size is already assigned, because otherwise it will throw an error. If my size is here, then show me this component. So I've got my width and height. So I can use it in my bar chart component. I will pass the width and height of that values to my SVG. Let's check how it looks now. Obviously same, black. I've got my SVG, which takes actually only 16 pixels. Oh, I know why. Because this div, there's a typo. Yeah, so my SVG is taking entire area of the screen. Now, in order to use my D3, I have to create a useEffect function. First, I want to select my ref, and when I select it, I assign it to my to an SVG variable, which I can use now. I can add different elements to that. For example, I can add a text as I had before. So I want to add a white text at the top, which will say that it's a bar chart with some numbers. So I take my SVG and I append text element, which is SVG element, and the text will be bar. Okay, I won't be able to see it now because the text is black, but it's obviously here. It has been added to my chart. It has basically the origin value of 0, pixels. So let's just add some attributes, and it's not visible right now because it's black. So I'll just add more attributes like fill, white. Yeah, I'm using width here, obviously, and I will transform it by the half of the screen minus 50 pixels. I'm just guessing that it's going to take like a big beam in the middle and 30 pixels from top, and I will give it font size of 18. I wonder if it's pixels. Actually, the text was appended to the SVG element, and it gives it like half the width and 30 pixels from the top. The font size is 18. I don't need to specify the number. So I can give it like 18 here, I think, or 24. Let's make it bigger. So I'll push the data into my SVG. I created a variable called selection. The way that D3 works with those elements, it first selects whatever is on the screen. So if there are any rectangles within that SVG, if there were any, it would actually use them, and then it would calculate how many it needs, and it would add them. Then I assign data to this. So now with this data, I can start creating the bars. I create another variable, which will be like so. D3 also uses enter. When I have this selection here, in order to go into specific elements, so now I want to style different bars separately. So I'm actually using this function called enter, and I gave it like a variable. It's easier for me to work with. I could obviously just chain everything to the SVG, but I prefer to divide it into multiple variables. Then it's easier for me to control which one I'm working with. And now I can create a first bar. In order to use my bars properly and assign them properly on the X scale, I'm creating this X scale function in my case. You can call it whatever you want. And what this function will do, it will actually create the scale, and I pass the ranges here. So I've got my width of entire SVG minus 80, and I'm passing it the data, so it knows that this is how many elements I've got. I'm specifying that there is a padding between elements of 0.1. It's just like a arbitrary value I'm passing here. I will do a similar thing to Y scale. So this function checks the maximum value of my data, and it's creating this function that I can use later to scale it properly. So usually what I see people doing is separating those values into specific object. I can do that as well. It's useful later because I can just change them here. So I will give it like a 80 pixels from the top, and then left, right, bottom 60 pixels. These are just values I checked earlier and I kind of like them. Dimensions. And like it's based on how much data there will be, it will divide it into different areas, and then 0.1 of that will be left. Okay, so now I have those two functions. I can use them for my bars. I will make a constant variable. Like the bar will be a group, so I'm appending to my to this enter selection group, and then I'm passing this transform, so it will move by this much, for example. So it will pass to my xcale function some value from this array, and it will just go through my entire array and just assign values to that, and it will transform it by some specific values. So now that I have that, I'm going to make a rectangle for every bar. So I'm appending a rectangle to every element, and I'm giving it a width, and it's just like the D3 will calculate it based on my X scale, the width of that bar. And here I'm using height, so I'm taking full height of my SVG element, and then I'm subtracting the Y scale. So it's my calculation of how much, based on data, how much space it should take, and then I'm just subtracting the bottom top paddings. Let's just give it a fill for now of a blue. So I've got all my blue bars here. There is a cool function in D3 that, depending on which element it is, it will actually assign it different color. I will create a variable for that. I've got my colors, and it's using the scale ordinal, and there's a scheme category 10. It's just some D3 functions that will create those colors. And now if I pass the color, I will just give it a color and D. Oh no, D. It should actually give them different colors, and it will just look cooler. Okay, so now we've got our bars. They take different heights depending of what the data is actually there. Now that I have my bars, to each of them I will add some text above. So I will just say what's the value of this bar, and I'm just going to I will just use my bar that I used before, which is a group here, and I will append the text to it. I'm just passing the text, just the number of the value number from my array, and I will give it a white fill, and I will just transform it by, again, I'm using the same function here as I used for the bar, and I'm just by 2, so it's going to place it in the middle. I'm subtracting another 5 just to move it slightly further, and then I'm just going to move it by 10 pixels up. Probably could move it even further here. Let's just give it -10. I think they're quite center now. So now that we have our text, now I would like to add x-axis to my bar chart. So I'm going to append another group to my SVG element. So I'm not touching my bar anymore. I'm going to transform it by my dimensions left. My axis will look similar as my x-axis. It's just going to use this function from D3, and then I will transform it from the bottom and from the left, so it's not at the end. And if I look into my inspector, I've got all my elements here as a groups, which is cool, and I've got my text at the top. But now you probably think like, okay, Maciej, you created bar chart, but this is actually not really React stuff. What I like React about is actually you can divide everything into like sort of simple small components, and here I just placed everything in this useEffect, and it's just like dropped there, and it's just added to the DOM to this SVG, and that's it really. There is really nothing that you need React for. You could just make this graph in any other library, or you could just make it straight in JS. There's really no point to use React. So in next video, I will show you how to move all of that into sort of React JSX components. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you liked it, and I hope you will like my next video, dividing it into smaller sort of React JSX components.